Hey everyone, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Justin, and the beat goes on here. We are just a few days away from June the 28th, being the first round of the NHL entry draft, where we know a lot is going to go down in the NHL, and nobody really knows what to expect with the Toronto Maple Leafs right now, but I wanted to address one of the areas that has been gaining a lot of attention recently because of some trade speculation, which is goaltending with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, before I get into that, I do want to just address that I feel terrible for Calgary Flames fans right now with what they're going through. The report is that Michael Backlund, Elias Lindholm, Noah Hanifin, and even Tyler Toffoli have all told the team that they don't intend on signing an extension with them to stay in Calgary. Now, it's not like these players are right now walking into free agency. You can still obviously take the next year, take the offseason to trade these players, get some assets back, but it's just a terrible situation. It's not unusual for a player to say that they don't want to sign an extension. In fact, it's gaining a lot more popularity recently with John Tavares and Johnny Gaudreau and the likes of them. But to have four players from a single team in a single offseason all tell the team that they don't intend on signing, that is just a terrible situation. I honestly don't want any team to have to go through that, and especially one that just, had set the expectation that they're not rolling over by signing the likes of Nazem Kadri, Jonathan Huberdeau, and Mackenzie Weegar. They've now put themselves in a position where they kind of have a window where they still need to compete a little bit unless they intend on trading those players too, but it's just a mess of a situation. And yeah, you could come at me and say that Brad Treliving might be the root of it. I don't think that's the case. I just think, for whatever reason, Calgary isn't the most attractive market right now. When it rains and pours, when one player says that they want to leave, all of a sudden that players get a little bit more, comfortable with, saying that they're in the same boat. And again, just a terrible situation. I feel for them. I don't know what they're going to do. If I were them, I would consider a rebuild. But again, with the contracts that they've just signed, it makes it really difficult. So Flames fans, I feel for you. But going back to the conversation about the Toronto Maple Leafs now, a lot of rumors around goaltending in the NHL right now. Some goalies probably hitting the market that are going to be very, very enticing for some teams. Now, that's, Carter Hart, which has been linked to the Leafs, Connor Hellebuyck, who's even been linked to the Leafs, Adin Hill coming off of a Stanley Cup on his first big run with the team. He's an unrestricted free agent, so he's going to be open for grabs. Speaking of Calgary, I haven't heard this anywhere, but maybe they're exploring now trading Markstrom, given their situation of maybe having to retool and letting Dustin Wolf step in. So a lot of really good goalies on the market that are going to be paid some hefty money. And I think that the market has fluctuated a little bit. A few years ago, goaltenders were able to sign massive contracts for some big money, some big AAV. And then we saw some of those goalies not really pan out. Carey Price, obviously when he's healthy, is well worth the money. But when he's not healthy, then you've got $10 million for one player that has such a big impact on your LTIR. And then you had Sergei Bobrovsky, who was kind of, signed a $10 million deal and then did nothing with it and was the backup, if not the third string, for a number of years now in Florida. But then now, with Sergei Bobrovsky having bounced back and showing what he can do single-handedly for a team, because in my personal opinion, not to discredit Florida, but the biggest reason why they went as far as they did with Sergei Bobrovsky, without a doubt, I think Florida got outplayed in every series that they played and still managed to win just because they got really good goaltending and they were very opportunistic. So the likes of Sergei Bobrovsky playing so well and showing that he can carry a team, I think that market's going to start increasing again. Goalies are going to be able to start demanding a little bit more money. And that's a big concern for me as a Leafs fan, because when we're hearing the likes of, Carter Hart or Connor Hellebuyck potentially coming to the Leafs and then needing an extension, who knows what that might go for? To me, way too much of a price. Not interested whatsoever. The last thing that I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs need, as far as this needs to be addressed, otherwise they have no success, is goaltending. Because we've seen it. We've seen it with the Leafs and we've seen it with other teams as a case sample that you can get by without having a #1 true superstar goaltender. The Vegas Golden Knights just won a cup with maybe 5 goalies in their system. They picked up Quick. They had Robin Lehner, who didn't play a game this year. They had Logan Thompson, Laurent Brossoit, and then again, Aiden Hill being their 5th string goalie. Their last resort is the one that carries them to a Stanley Cup and plays terrific doing so. Because goaltenders, it's so weird. They're voodoo. A goalie could play terrible one season and be fantastic another. They could have an incredible game and then just shit the bed the next one. You never know what's going to happen. And yes, the better goalies are more consistent. They're more reliable. You know what you're getting out of them. But at what cost? Because if you're dumping a lot of assets into that player or a lot of cap into that player, that one player carries that position. With a forward, with a defenseman, you've got a unit. If that player goes down, you're hoping that the collective group can pick them up. Whereas with the goaltender, if that goaltender goes down, then you're on the backup. And yeah, maybe you have a good enough backup to get you through the situation, but you just lost so many assets, so much value out of your starting goaltender who went down. And even if they're in the net, you just don't know what you're necessarily going to expect. So for me, again, no interest in going for Hellebuck, no interest in signing a big UFA goalie, no interest in going for Carter Hart, unless the price is right. If it's a reasonable price, if it's not too expensive, yeah, explore it, especially with the contracts that they're currently under. But if it's going to cost more than, you know, one of your big 4 or a top prospect, a lot of draft picks, which we don't really have much with the Leafs, not interested whatsoever. I don't even want to discuss it. Now, here's a hot take for me, given the current goaltending situation. Now, Ilya Samsonov wasn't qualified by the Washington Capitals. He went to free agency, and the Leafs were smart enough to scoop him up. I thought that was a terrific move. I addressed it at the time. I thought it was a terrific move picking up Matt Murray for getting assets like we did in that deal. And now we've got Joseph Woll, who we knew was in the system, who we knew had potential, but had some injury issues, wasn't playing all too often in the AHL last season, and you just didn't know what you were getting out of that player right now. You had a good idea that he'd be someone in the NHL or worthy of playing in the NHL in the future, but at what point? And this year he stepped into the roster and played absolutely incredible. During the regular season, he was fantastic. There was conversation of even starting him for the playoffs. And then when Samsonov did go down, he got the nod ahead of Matt Murray and was far from the reason why the Toronto Maple Leafs lost that series. So, again, of all the things that we should be worried about, it's not the goaltending situation. And here's my hot take. Ilya Samsonov is now a restricted free agent, which means that we still own his rights, but he does need a new deal. If he were to go to another team, he would either need to be offer sheeted, which I don't think is going to happen, or traded for his rights. We still have Matt Murray for one more year at a decent chunk of change. I think it's about $4.5 million. And then we've got Joseph Woll, who, as it sits right now, is our 3rd stringer who's going to be starting in the AHL. People are talking about trading Matt Murray. And I'm not opposed to trading Matt Murray, but everybody's talking about, in order to trade Matt Murray, you either need to include a prospect or the 1st-round draft pick that we got from the Boston Bruins, when it didn't even cost a 1st-round draft pick for the Ottawa Senators to send him here. It cost them, I think, 25% in salary retention, a 3rd and a 7th, something like that. So why on earth, now that the goaltender is already retained salary from Ottawa and has another season under his belt where I thought he played good enough. Like, he wasn't a star, but he wasn't a liability whatsoever compared to the goalies in the past with, like, Peter Mrazek. He wasn't that at all. He was just unhealthy, unfortunately. He couldn't stay healthy, and that's a trend in his career, and it's definitely a concern. But given his circumstances, why would you need to attach a top prospect or a 1st-round draft pick when you didn't even need to do that from the Ottawa Senators? You could argue, well, we lost that trade. I don't think we did. We gave future considerations for a goaltender at retention for plus a 3rd and a 7th. It was a good deal given the goalie market last season. If you're looking at trading Matt Murray and it requires that kind of cost added to it just to get him off the books, I'm not interested in moving him. In fact, I personally, and this is more of a Kyle Dubas move, I do not see Brad Treliving being anywhere near the neighborhood of this kind of galaxy braining, but I personally would explore the trade market for Ilya Samsonov. And I love Samsonov. I do. I really, really liked what he brought to the table. I love his personality. I think he's great for the team. I think it worked out really, really well. And he had a fantastic season where his value is much higher than it might be in 1 or 2 years. But the thing is, you know now that Joseph Woll is ready. He's ready enough to step up, at least as a backup. And I think he's capable of being in a tandem because He's shown that he can. He played as a starter in the Stanley Cup finals, or not the finals, sorry, in the playoffs. He's capable of it. And are you really going to sign Ilya Samsonov to a deal where he's probably looking to get term? I don't know that for a fact. I haven't heard any reports on it, but I would assume that Ilya Samsonov, his main focus is term because that's stability. You know that you're going to be in the league for X amount of time. So do you want to sign Samsonov to, let's say, a 3 to 5 year deal where you've now committed to him being your starting goaltender? Joseph Woll is then your backup. And in 2 or 3 years' time, when you think Joseph Woll is capable of being a starting goaltender, either Samsonov, who you signed to, let's say, 5 years at $5 million a year, is now your backup, or you explore trading that player. To me, it just doesn't make sense with the timeline. If you're committed to Joseph Woll, if you believe that he can be in the NHL either as a backup or even a starter within the next 3 years, I don't think it makes sense to sign Samsonov. You can get good value for that player coming off of, so far, a career-high performance. Matt Murray, again, only has 1 more year left on his deal. So if you run with a tandem of Woll and Murray, I don't think you're getting all that much worse. You do have an issue with consistency and making sure that they're healthy. I would definitely suggest going into unrestricted free agency and picking up a 3rd stringer who you think can step in as a tandem if either of those guys were to go down. But a tandem of Woll and Murray, it's not a liability. And I'm not saying that it would be a liability to keep Samsonov. Absolutely not. In fact, the opposite. I just think that you can't be thinking strictly of next year. If you're thinking strictly next year and you're looking Samsonov and Woll, fantastic. I mean, the team's set up. But for the future, you got 2 guys that are going to be competing for a #1 spot, and then you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to trade one of them. That's the likely situation in my eyes. Plus the fact that Matt Murray, in order to move him off your books, you're talking about giving up a 1st-round draft pick. When we're looking at asset management, it just doesn't make sense. You need to, especially in a situation where the Leafs are, where they don't have much draft capital, they don't have too many prospects. Of their prospects, their biggest prospect pool, in my opinion, is their goaltending situation. They've got Hobey Baker finalist and Dryden McKay. They've got Vladislav Peksa, something along the lines of that. They had Ian Scott, but he unfortunately retired. They got Joseph Woll. They've got another guy in Russia, Akhtyamov, something like that. They've got goalies in their system. They are prepared for the future. I don't want them handcuffing themselves over a situation just because they want to keep Samsonov at a cost that might be a little too rich and then trade Murray at a cost that, again, is too rich. They're just not in a situation to do that. I don't think that's a likely situation. I do think it's likely that they're removing Murray. I think it's likely that they're re-signing Samsonov, and it's likely that Samsonov and Woll will be the tandem for the foreseeable future, let's say 3 years. For me personally, if I were in charge, I'd consider the route that I mentioned. But in all, the last thing that we need to do right now is focus on goaltending, especially like talking about trading for a big fish goaltender. This team needs to be able to score. They went 7 straight games with only 2 goals in the playoffs last year, a consistent story that I've been hammering home for a number of years now. Even when, it was Jack Campbell or Frederik Andersen in net and we had a D pairing with like Ron Hainsey on the first pairing, our issues have always been scoring goals in the playoffs. Always, always. You can contest me all you want, but look at the stats. Look at how many goals we score. We don't. We just don't score. We've got a big 4 core that gets paid a ton of money that just can't put the puck in the net when it matters. So address that. If you're going to make a big fish trade for the forward group. Don't touch the defense. I know that True Living is big on making a defensive unit. Now that Hannafin's available, maybe that's an attractive piece that you're looking at, but don't look at the goalies. Sign, trade who we've got. Don't look at getting a big fish. I just don't think it's worth it. Let me know your thoughts, though. I'd be interested to hear. I mean, does the likes of Connor Hellebuck or Carter Hart attract you? Is it interesting? Obviously, it would be great to have either of those players, but with the cap situation, it doesn't make sense. I would love to have either of those goalies on my team. I think that obviously makes the team a hell of a lot better. You just got to look at the big picture here and try to figure out what works and what needs our most attention. But let me know your thoughts. And like I said, we've got the awards coming up next week. We've got 2 rounds, 2 days of the draft, and then free agency is just next weekend. So lots of news coming. I'm sure a lot more clarity in Leafs land. And so we'll talk about it then when we see what happens, and I'll see you in the next one.